Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you with us. Um, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I am Hala Adwan, an architect and Autodesk Cloud technical specialist at Accienta, where I work closely with AEC organizations across the GCC technology adoption, BIM implementation, and building stronger technical capabilities. Joining me today is Lisa Taylor, customer advocacy specialist at Ego Point Software. With over 20 years in learning strategy and workforce enablement, Lisa works with AEC and a manufacturing organization worldwide to surface hidden skills gap and turn them into data-driven learning plans and capability. Lisa, it's great to have you with us today. We want to start this webinar with a question most organizations in this region cannot answer confidently right now. So if a client asks you tomorrow, can you prove your team has the capability to deliver this project? What would you say? Think about that, not in the headcount, not training attendance records, not your software licenses, but rather validated, measurable, role-specific technical capability, the kind that holds up when a project board or like a client or a tender committee asks you to prove your team is ready. Because the GCC is investing heavily in technology and talent, and yet, the gap between the tools organizations deploy and the people who can use them effectively keeps widening. And that's exactly what today is all about. So, why this webinar and why now? Because across the GCC, three significant pressures are converging at the same time, creating a workforce capability challenge that can no longer be addressed in isolation. The first in scale is 920,000 new roles by 2030. Not a projection, we are actually waiting for it. It is already visible in the project pipelines of major AEC firms across the region. So recruiting at that pace is one challenge, but bringing all of those people to a consistent high standard of technical performance is something entirely different. At the same time, knowledge mobility is creating its own layer of risk. So in this region, especially experienced professionals, they move between projects, organizations, and even countries in some examples. So when a senior BIM manager leaves, they don't just leave a vacancy. Years of methods, firm standards, a project experience, and even institutional knowledge can live with them. And the impact often isn't visible until a project is already feeling it. And while organizations are managing both growth and knowledge retention, technology isn't standing still. So we can see that we have Autodesk, AI, digital workflows, all evolving continuously. The skills team need today may not be the same skills they will need 2 years from now, for example. So here, where the traditional training cannot keep pace with that rate of change, and more importantly, it cannot reflect your organization's specific standards and way of working. So the answer isn't simply to run more training days, it's to rethink how capability is built in the first place. And the leading organizations in the AEC are already doing exactly that with measurable results. Today, we'll show you what they're doing differently. So before we go further, we'd love to get a quick sense of who's in the room with us today. You'll see a short poll on your screen. Go ahead and select the option that best describes your role, whether you're executive or on the BIM aspect, perhaps more on the BIM coordinator, project management, on the HR. We're seeing a great mix of all the executive director, BIM managers, CAD, IT digital transformation, and even Autodesk users, whether you're on the architectural aspect, the designer aspect, or engineering. That's exactly why this conversation matters. Because whether you're in BIM, project delivery, digital transformation, or even um, leadership, the capability, the workforce capability affects you all on a different level. But as we go through it today, you will see how it connects back to the same business problem. As for today's agenda, here's just how the session is structured. We start with the context, what's happening across the GCC, why it matters, and then we move into the practical side of applied learning, Pinnacle Series, Knowledge Smart, and their live demonstration. From there, we bring it back to the business perspective with measurable results, implementation, and value. Everything we cover today follows one clear logic. We see the gap, we measure it, we close it, and prove it worked. To address a challenge like this, technology and workforce development need to work together, and that's the foundation of our partnership with EaglePoint Software. At Accienta, we are an Autodesk Gold partner working with the AEC and manufacturing organizations across the GCC. Through that work, we've seen something consistent. Two organizations can invest in the same technology and still achieve very different results because technology is only part of the equation, and the real difference comes from the people using it, the standards they follow, and how effectively the knowledge is applied in everyday work. That's where the ego point comes in. They bring Pinnacle Series and Knowledge Smart, combining applied learning with skills assessment and measurement. So Accienta brings the regional expertise, AEC knowledge, and implementation experience. Together, we both connect the technology, the learning, and the way organizations can actually operate. 920,000 euros by 2030. This is a huge number when we say even 68% of firms reporting a need for stronger digital skills and one of the highest rates of the workforce mobility in the world. Each of these is a serious challenge on its own. Together, they create like a compounding problem. How do you onboard people at that pace without compromising quality? And how do you retain institutional knowledge when experienced professionals move? And how do you even make sure your technology investments actually translate into project performance? So, because adding headcount is not the same as adding capability, you can have hundreds of engineers on a project, but if they are working with inconsistent methods, or for example, variable proficiency and knowledge that is not being shared, you aren't increasing the delivery capacity. Maybe you are increasing the delivery risk. So that raises one question that we need to address first. Do organizations in the GCC or worldwide actually have the visibility into the workforce capability? Would love to hear your input on that, Lisa.
Hello, everyone, and also hello to everyone watching the recording today. As Hala said, most people can actually point to a training log or perhaps some attendance records. Some may even go down to the number of hours their teams have spent consuming learning content. But almost no one can actually prove of who can actually do the work. And that's the gap on this slide. Learning gets assigned on assumption, not evidence. Knowledge that lives in people's heads, but not in a system that can be queried. Training records that show attendance, but never confidence. And leadership is left guessing at readiness instead of measuring it. Visibility has to come first. You can't target learning, prioritize spend, or prove impact until you actually know where your workforce stands today. That's the problem the rest of this session will look to solve. Next slide, please. So let's look at this chart for a second. That's not hypothetical. That's what happens when 5 forces run unchecked. People rotate out of their knowledge. Technology moves faster than anyone can upskill. Expertise stays siloed in individuals, and training stays generic, and nobody has visibility into any of it. So you may argue some of these can be manageable individually, but together, uncorrected, they compound. That's why we'll get to the training eventually isn't a strategy. The gap between what your projects need and what your workforce can deliver only gets wider the longer it gets unmeasured.
And this brings us to an important point. Traditional training itself isn't the problem, the model is. So think about a familiar scenario where an engineer attends a course, absorbs a large amount of information, and returns to a project work. A few weeks later, they need, for example, to apply one specific workflow. They can't quite recall it, so they ask a colleague or search online or go back to the method that they already know. The learning wasn't reinforced at the point of need, and so it didn't hold. But there's a second failure. Not everyone starts from the same place. So a junior engineer may need the foundational Revit support, but a senior BIM manager may need one advanced coordination workflow, yet both are often given the same program. Resources are spent on coverage that was never needed, while the gaps that actually matter remain unresolved. So training hours increases, costs accumulate, and the underlying capability gaps can remain exactly where they were. That's why the shift has to be from training as one-time event to learning as a continuous part of how people work. And that shift has a name. It's applied learning. So what does applied learning actually mean in practice? The core idea is straightforward. The right guidance at the right time in the right place. Think back to that engineer working inside Civil 3D, Revit, or AutoCAD, for example. He reaches a workflow they don't quite remember. Without applied learning, the work stops. It stops for seconds, it stops even for minutes. They search, they ask a colleague, or revert to what they already know. So applied learning changes that. The guidance is available inside the tool that they're already using it at that exact moment they need it. But here's what makes it genuinely different from simply having access to generic content. The answer they find reflects your organization's standards, not a random tutorial, your workflow, your templates, your best practices. So instead of asking, how do I do this? The employee can answer the more important question is, how do we do this in our organization? And when hundreds of people can access the same knowledge consistently, you're not simply delivering training, you're creating consistency in how work gets done. And this is where Pinnacle Series takes applied learning from a concept and makes it rather operational at scale. Built specifically for AEC and manufacturing organizations, it creates a centralized learning and knowledge environment that sits alongside the way technical teams actually work. The approach comes down to three things. So, in simple words, first we start with learn. The right knowledge becomes available inside the tools, people are already using it when they need it and not after the fact. Then standardize. So your firm's methods, workflows, and even standards becomes part of the environment. So development reflects how your organization delivers work and not just how the software functions. And finally, improve. As capability develops, the organization gains visibility into where progress is happening and where investment should be focused next. So the bigger value of Pinnacle Series is that it gives organizations a way to capture what they know, turn that knowledge into something teams can consistently learn from, and create greater consistency of how work is delivered across projects, teams, and even offices. Now let's look at the capabilities that make that possible. Rather than going through every feature in isolation, it helps to think of them in three groups because that reflects how they're actually experienced. The first is content and delivery. So videos, structured learning paths, workflows, documents, even custom content and libraries. This covers the full range of how people access knowledge, from a 2-minute procedural answer to a 45-minute structured learning path, because not every development needs like to take the same form and the same timing. The second is personalization. So personalized learning, AI-powered guidance, related learning topics, skill assessments, and Spark AI-driven nano learning. This is what shifts the experience from a static content library to an environment that responds to the individual. It responds to their role, their existing knowledge, and the specific areas where support is needed. And the third is management and insight. So assignments, tracking, reporting, and the platform customization. This is the organizational layer. The layer that the visibility allows learning teams and leadership to understand what's being delivered and how it's being used and what impact it's actually having in the workforce. When all three work together, learning becomes targeted and perhaps accessible, measurable at scale, and that raises an important distinction. Knowing how to use a tool is one thing, but knowing how to apply it within your organization standards is something very different.
Absolutely, Hala. I couldn't agree more, because knowing which button to click is certainly not the same as knowing which template your organization mandates, or which naming convention is non-negotiable, or perhaps who's actually competent to be signed off for a specific live project. Those questions are unique to your organization, and no generic platform can answer them, because the answer isn't in a manual, it's in your standards. Here, I also want us to consider the cost of that one user getting stuck at that moment of need, not having the right content or guidance to reference, and then produces the work to the best of their assumption. What is the hidden costs, and how does that compound across connected teams? So how do we know where to get started? Which skills does our teams actually have versus what you assume they might have? Which gaps matter most right now? And can you prove months later that the investment moved the needle? That's knowledge smart. That's the skills intelligence layer underneath everything that we've spoken about so far. It doesn't just enable personalized learning, it targets it. Knowledge Smart establishes an objective baseline for what someone can do, and then connects any gaps straight to personalized learning in Pinnacle Series. And it's not only about uncovering weaknesses or skill gaps, but assessments can often uncover capability that isn't visible from someone's job title.
So the framework only works if organizations are actually measuring it at the first place. So before again we go further, a quick poll where are you right now on measuring your team skills? Are you going on gut feeling? You've done surveys but nothing validated. You have a process but it's not connected to learning, or you're actively benchmarking. So regardless of where you are today, by the end of this session, you'll have a clear picture of what the next steps looks like and how to get there and how to customize it based on your organizational needs. I think we're seeing a lot of gut feeling only, and this is where the problem relies on, that a lot of organizations, regardless of their skill or their projects, they only rely on gut feeling, and that this can't be projected for the future aspects or on the technical aspect as well. So as you can see, we have the gut feeling with 50%, done surveys, nothing validated 25%, and have a process not connected to a learning 25%. So here comes the idea when both platforms that we already mentioned work together. They create a continuous cycle, not a one-time intervention. So we start by measuring capability to understand where the gaps are, not by gut feeling, by actually measuring it. And from there, we standardize organizational knowledge to deliver targeted learning within the flow of work and then measure the impact. And as needs evolve, the cycle itself, it continues. So the word that matters here is that it's continuous. This is not an annual exercise where everyone completes courses in Q1 and development isn't revisited for 12 months. Capability changes because people, projects, and even technology changes, and the model has to evolve with it. So when the cycle operates properly, capability compounds, and every iteration produces better data, more targeted development, and even a clearer picture of workforce readiness. So this is where everything we've discussed comes together because now we're not simply delivering learning, we're rather creating a continuous cycle of measurable workforce development. So it starts with measure. Knowledge Smart establishes an objective baseline. Instead of assuming where the gaps are, you have evidence showing what people know, where the gap exists, and which gaps exactly matter for the roles, the projects they're expected to deliver. Once you know that, development becomes much more precise. So those gaps can be mapped directly to the most relevant learning rather than assigning the same program to everyone. From there, Pinnacle Series delivers the right learning through structured development and in workflow support. So people can build their skills without being pulled away from a real project work. But what makes this cycle powerful is what happens next. You measure again, you reassess the same capability and can see what actually changed. Did the gap itself close? Did proficiency improve? That's evidence of improvement, not simply evidence that someone attended the training or we already done this certificate. And from there, the cycle continues. Each time, development becomes more targeted because it's informed by what you have already measured. And that's when the conversation starts to change from what training should we provide to what capability do we actually need to build? Where do we need it? And can we prove that it has improved all along the organizational scale? So here, Lisa, we've talked about measuring capability, but before an organization can measure it, there has to be a clear understanding of what the capability should actually look like. And that begins at the organizational level, as I mentioned. So what skills do we value as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does start with a very important consideration of what does the organization need right now. Sometimes that means consulting project teams, sitting a bit closer to certain conversations and understanding where the pain points are, where are the hidden risks, and where are the compounding costs. And it's about asking what capabilities matter right now and where are we relying on external contractors potentially instead of building that capability internally, and whether people are being developed also for what's next. So addressing the needs of what is pertinent right now, but also forward looking and building up capacity so that we can meet the growing needs of also meeting project requirements and future projects.
Indeed. And once, Lisa, those priorities are clear, they need to translate into what individual teams are expected to deliver, which raises the next question of what skills do our employees need to do their jobs well now and in the future?
Yes, most certainly. And I think the technology definitely does support and provide really useful evidence in helping you answer these questions. So then you can combine that subjective feedback that you're getting from your teams with that objective verification, and you can move ahead from a data-driven perspective rather than just from assumption or people's opinions.
That's indeed an interesting perspective, and we can see it all along the business and all along the AEC firms. But there's another aspect that the future dimension is particularly important in AEC. We can see AI, automation, and increasingly connected digital workflows. They are changing what we expect from our teams. So roles that look one way today can look very different in 3 years. And that creates a resourcing question because not every capability necessarily needs to be developed internally. So, how can we use contractors more strategically to minimize waste and help close our skills gaps?
Yeah, most certainly. One thing I will add here as well is every day I'm working with organizations and listening to how their team members are accessing AI resources to upskill or to boost productivity. Now, that capability, that capacity that's building underneath the surface is really valuable for any organization. But without it being surfaced, it will remain hidden within the teams. And your organization will not be able to take full advantage of that increased capacity and skills that may be hidden within the teams. And that's where I wanted to iterate that a lot of people see this as perhaps a punitive exercise or only identifying weaknesses or skill gaps. But what I have found is it opens eyes in terms of, I didn't know I had that team member over there that had the skill. And now I can do resource leveling, I can do knowledge capture and sharing, and I can boost productivity in new ways. And I can also minimize cost because I have that capacity inside my team that I wasn't even aware of.
And that's where the skills visibility changes the nature of the decision. So it moves from reactive, we have a gap, bring in a contractor, to a strategic, in other words, understanding which capabilities make sense to build internally and where external expertise genuinely add value. Ultimately, all of this has to translate into rather a clear expectation at the role level. So what skills per job role do we have to develop now and even in the future?
Yes, most certainly. And I just think the key piece here is that we know that job roles and job functions are changing at the speed of light. And so in order for us to
Indeed.
stay adaptable, we have to be data driven and we have to be able to scale and fast track enablement. So we cannot just send people through long structured courses that may not be the right approach. We may need to deploy one of our tools, which is the Spark Nano Learning, to fast track that development and connect people with the most relevant content. So we can only do that when we have access to the right technology and the right systems to help us scale that reach.
Indeed, and that's what turns workforce development from a general training initiative into something measurable and strategic. So instead of saying we need to upskill the team, we can be precise about which skills do we need, where we need them, and how those requirements will evolve. The precision is what this whole framework is designed to deliver, and brings us straightforward but important question of picture your next major project kickoff. The client asks, can you demonstrate that this team has the capability to deliver this project to the required standard? What would you say in that situation? When workforce capability isn't visible, three things happen and each carries a real business cost. Training becomes based on assumptions, so investment may miss the gaps that actually matter. As a result, those hidden gaps can then turn into unnecessary recruitment or contractor costs. And without an objective benchmark, decisions rely on CVs, job titles, or even sometimes LinkedIn posts or perception rather than evidence. That becomes a real problem when a client or a project board asks you to prove your workforce is ready. So let me ask directly, in other words, like right now at this exact moment, could you name your organization's top 3 technical skills gaps by role or by project, and what evidence would you use to identify them? This question may elaborate on different aspects and different categories, but that's precisely the visibility gap that Knowledge Smart closes. So now let's show you how it works with our live demo. We've talked about the methodology. Now let's show you what it actually looks like in practice. So Lisa and I will take you through the full workflow. We're going to start with a Pinnacle series. So let me show you what it looks like in practice, starting with a situation that happens every day on live projects. So you're a junior architect working in Revit and you hit a workflow that you haven't used before. You don't want to stop, work or search through folders or wait for a senior colleague. You need the answer now. So this is Pinnacle series. Here where it comes. It's browser-based, no installation. As long as you have internet access, you have the platform. And before we go further, the platform supports over 140 languages. So for our GCC workforce that's genuinely multilingual, that means every user can work in the language they're most effective in. The homepage itself is personalized, and the moment you log in, it's very easy to use and navigate. So you can see here on the left-hand menu where you can see the assignments, libraries, bookmarks, Spark AI, and even the administration portal. So as we go through the platform itself, we can see active assignments. They're front and center at the top. The platform surfaces what they're working on rather than leaving them to go looking for it. Below, and as you can see, all the assignments are visible there. Below that is Spark, micro-learning, and the featured libraries that the organization has chosen to highlight. So for example, in our aspect of Accienta, we featured Autodesk Forma, Civil 3D, Revit, and then the libraries itself. So moving into the libraries, the depth is real differentiator. So we can see Revit, Civil 3D, AutoCAD, Bluebeam, Rhino, Grasshopper, Enscape, SketchUp, and even global BIM standards, and as well Bentley. So these aren't extras. These are the tools AEC teams are actually using, and without, like, they're using it on live projects, and within each library comes, there's like a genuine depth across each library and how to use it. So for example, in our aspect of Accienta, I'm going to write an example of Revit 2026. Here we can see that there's genuine depth across, for example, beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. So a new graduate, for example, and a senior engineer with decade of experience can both find content that's relevant to where they actually are, not generic material calibrated for a middle ground that fits nobody well. As for the content type itself, whether you prefer structured learning paths, short videos, or like quick reference documents, the content adapts to how you work, not the other way around. So here we want to explore, learning paths itself. So as you can see here, we already chose a Revit 3D. The content type is the learning path. So for structured development, learning paths are the starting point. Whether you are self-enroll or assign, either way, it surfaces on the homepage immediately, so it stays visible. And inside the path itself, as you can see here, I self-enrolled. I put my due date when I'm expected to finish this assignment. Inside the path, the course list on the left, as you can see, there's a clear structure, clear progression. We even have videos, and the videos inside the learning path run 5 minutes or less, designed for someone mid-project, not in a classroom. And even when you choose like a video, playback rate is adjustable, full screen is available, and the transcript itself is on the right side, as you can see here. And when you like click on any line to jump directly to that moment, so it avoids any time-consuming aspect. And furthermore, courses include downloadable files and quizzes. So once you complete the course, it clears from the homepage automatically. And as you can see now, we can have the Revit course and then the certification that I already completed this course. Another type, and it actually gives you automatically to the second point. So even if I finish that aspect, it directly gives me the access to the point in the learning path itself. Another content type is workflows. So we already mentioned how learning path is. What is workflow? Workflows are unique to Pinnacle series and worth paying attention to. These aren't videos or documents. They capture rather process step by step, as you can see. So on the left side, we can see the logic tree, and then visual process map in the center. So you can see it as a diagram, and then on the right side, side, you can see how when someone hits uncertain point in life project, they can open the relevant workflow, get the answer, and gets back to work. So no re-enrollment, no waiting, and the workflow itself can be cloned and modified. So the guidance reflects your firm standards, not just generic software instructions. And as you can see of how detailed it can get, that gives us the point where, okay, for example, working inside Revit, so how can I access help to that? In application guidance, it's called related learning. So inside Revit, and this applies to Civil 3D, AutoCAD, Plan 3D, and even Inventor, Pinnacle runs alongside the application. And as you click through commands, relevant videos load automatically for the specific command. So the guidance comes to you based on what you are doing. Firms can also place their own custom videos at the top of the panel. So the first thing someone sees is the firm's own standard and not generic product content. So for example, here, as you can see, editing groups, because I just clicked on the group command. As for the documents, bookmarks, and sharing, beyond learning paths and workflows, standalone documents and videos are as well available, because as we mentioned, it's based on the person's preference of how they like learning. So all clonable and modifiable, as I mentioned, workflows, standalone documents, and even videos. Every resource can be bookmarked, as you can see on the right top side. And when a colleague asks a question, you send the link. The question itself gets answered. So both people save time, and the knowledge transfer happens through the platform rather than it happening informally in the chat. So you can see here, you can copy the link formatted or copy link unformatted and send it directly to a colleague or for your internal learning management. As for the last content type, it's the video. We already mentioned where we can have a clear and direct understanding of the ideas in videos. So going back to the home, we see Spark. Spark is Pinnacle's micro-learning feature. It's short AI-curated videos between 2 and 5 minutes maximum, served up based on the topics and interests you select. So here, for example, I selected architectural, structural engineering, and civil engineering. So all the videos that are going to show are within the interest that I selected. It's designed for engineers, architects, or anyone who wants to keep developing but doesn't have the time to commit to full course right now or full learning path. So you can see here a few minutes between meetings or on a lunch break, for example, or at the start of the day. That's all it takes to stay sharp and stay up to date with the latest technology and software updates. Furthermore, we have the AI chat. The AI chat works like a knowledgeable colleague who has read everything in the platform. So you type your question in plain language. And for example, here I wrote, how do I design an HVAC system in Revit? So the whole point is to that it gives the direct answers plus references, as you can see, to the exact videos, documents, or workflows, the Pinnacle series where the answers came from. So as you can see here, I can watch the video, and I even can open the resource directly from the chat window. What makes AI chat here different than any general AI tool is that it only searches within Pinnacle series. So every answer is vetted either from the standard content library or from your firm's own custom content. No random results from the internet, no unverified sources, just accurate, approved guidance. So we already showcased the perspective of a junior architect, but let's shift that perspective to a different perspective. Let's imagine a BIM manager or a digital delivery lead. That's the experience from the individual side. Now, the same environment from a different seat, the BIM manager responsible for capability and consistency across the wider team. So for him or for them, they would be more interested in the administration portal. The admin portal is where the control lives, custom content, assignments, user management, reporting, the same platform, but a completely different level of visibility. So we want to start with the user management. The platform itself syncs with Microsoft Entra ID. So the entire organization onboarded without manual data entry. Groups as well can be created automatically. So as you can see here, when we write the users, you can as well add the users manually. But as for the groups, there are groups control library visibility, reporting filters, role or discipline specific, a structural team and an architecture team. They do not need the same libraries. So groups handle that without creating separate environments. So you can see here we have different groups and group types. Furthermore, there are regarding the aspect of the security and authentication. There is, as I mentioned, the Microsoft Entra ID and single sign-ons as well. They are available. So here you can see the groups. You can enter the groups manually. For the security and authentication, the single sign-on is available. As for the assignment management, here we select the learning path or assessment, or we assign new assessment. We can add the users or groups we can assign. From that point, status is visible at the individual and group level. So who's completed, who's in progress, who hasn't started. And from the employee's side, that assignment is on their homepage immediately. So you can see here we're assigning the users for this assignments. We can use it. You can assign it based on users, as I mentioned, or based on groups. Here I assign myself, for example, an assessment. And as you can see, it's as simple as we clicked on assign. It's the assessment is assigned. I can already have it on my homepage. As for the custom content, so 3 routes that we can choose. You can clone an existing resource and modify it with your own standards and imagery, or you can upload your own videos, document and files, or you can batch and upload the automatic transcription and build a learning path document or a workflow from scratch. So here you can see all the options that you can choose based on the organizational preference. You upload the new content, for example, the documents or the videos that you have. The content is published with controlled visibility. So organizations wide or restricted to specific groups, as you can see. So for example, here, we're just showcasing the content itself. So for example, for Accienta, we have our internal resources. It's quite significant to showcase that the content is published with controlled visibility. So you can restrict who can see what, your BIM exclusion plans, standard operating procedures, coordination workflows, all accessible to the right people when they need it. And this is what moves the platform from learning tool to an organizational knowledge environment. So here you can see how we can share it with the groups. how we can share it with the users. As for the library itself, admins control which software versions are visible. So when a new version of Revit or Civil 3D releases, it activates and updates the content and retire the previous versions. So the teams always work with the guidance that matches the tools on their project. One of the most important things as well that I would like to highlight is reporting. So, and specifically two brand new tabs in reporting. So when we press on reporting, we can see the manager overview dashboard. The manager overview gives report managers and admins one single page showing you logins, assessments, scores, and content activity across their users. So you click into any individual to see their full history, assessment taken, average score, and how much they have improved. It's firms wide and goes back to the historical data, as you can see, of who, what users accessed what timing, what did they actually open. So it's built to be business review ready, and the filters at the top make it straightforward to generate charts for stakeholder updates. So here you can see the total assessment taken, the time saved of personalized versus the full course, and what the average time is saved, what is the total enrollment by month, like current enrollment, completed courses, what is the percentage, what is the total resources accessed, and what is the total searches. So here in the graph, you can see that even if I am enrolled but I haven't started, it's going to showcase for the manager overview that these users, they already access the platform, they enrolled, but they haven't started yet, or they have started, or for example, they already completed the course. And here we start with the user management reports as well. You can see here the total Pinnacle logins, who accessed what are the total registered users, and as well, everything can be elaborated in a graph, even in figures, with like the login date versus the time that has been spent, the Pinnacle logins histogram, and even the breakdown of login data, users, enrollment, the user type itself, if they're assigned to groups, what are their login IDs. That brings us to the usage reports. So top accessed content, top searches, and now a Spark preference breakdown, which industries and topics your team is independently choosing to develop. That's not even a side learning topic. That's a signal worth acting on. So here you can see like the total resources accessed, even elaborated in graphs, accessed by content type, whether your users are interested in videos, whether your users are interested in learning types, documents, even workflows, and the resources accessed by the access date. So when were they most active, and what are the top accessed content within Pinnacle series, what are the top searches based on your users like usage, the top Spark preferences for the industries, and the top Spark preferences as for the topics. And again, a breakdown for everything that has been mentioned in clear format. As for the learning reports, assignment status across your team, whether it's completed, in progress, not started. So something interesting to point is that, as you can see here, we can have the course enrollment all in details with percentages of who accessed what. And something interesting as well to point out is like the completed courses within the users. As you saw earlier in the learning path, we had quizzes. So for example, as a user, if I do the quiz and I miss something, it even shows here the top missed questions for all the users, and where are the skills gap exactly that needs to be addressed. So, you know, where knowledge gaps are concentrated before they become a project issue. So to bring all of that together, we're looking at one connected environment. For the individual, it's the right knowledge, the right moment, at the right place. For the organization, it's about capturing the knowledge, standardizing it across teams, and gaining visibility into how people are learning and developing. But that leaves us with one important question before we assign development or decide like where support is needed, is how do we objectively know where the actual skills gap are? And Lee said this is where knowledge smart becomes particularly important. So could you show us how knowledge smart approaches skill assessment and how an organization can use that data to identify where development should actually be focused?
Now that we've seen how the integration works inside Pinnacle series, let's move over to the Knowledge Smart admin side and look at a few key areas. It is on our roadmap to bring all of Knowledge Smart's functionality directly into Pinnacle series. But today there are still a few areas that need to be managed inside the Knowledge Smart admin dashboard itself. As you log in, you will notice that there are 3 sides to Knowledge Smart: tests, general surveys, and skill audits. But for today's demonstration, we are going to focus on tests. Let's take a look. Pinnacle series is where your people learn. Knowledge Smart is where your administrator will go to set up your assessments and related settings. Administrators typically only ever touch 4 areas here. Let's start with where your assessments actually live and head into the library. Our library area is strategically organized by draft content and published content. This is hardly ever about starting from scratch and more about copying a validated one from over 700 plus options and just tweaking and adjusting it to your needs. We notice here that we can publish tests or we can publish modules, which highlights the fact that we can repurpose content if we need to. Our draft content area highlights the typical structure of an assessment. Each test is broken into a series of test modules, and each test module consists of a series of questions. We notice here that we can even create content from scratch. So we can create questions, we can group those questions into modules, and we can group those modules into tests. So you might wonder, what types of questions can I create? Knowledge Smart supports a variety of question types. And within these question types, we also have knowledge-based questions and task-based questions. Here is an example of metadata that's associated with an assessment question. So we notice that our content is always tagged according to specific category tags, which helps us organize and find content easily. Our training tags are the building bridge towards our content. These are not only instrumental in terms of flagging skill gaps, but they also map to the learning tags inside Pinnacle series, which allows the personalized learning path to be curated based on the individual skill gaps that are flagged. As I mentioned, we have knowledge-based questions and task-based questions. And we also have 2 task options. One is where we're asking the user to interrogate something and come to a conclusion. And the second option is to go and modify using a data set and provide the necessary answer. Our questions are grouped by skill level, which provides the opportunity to connect your users with the most relevant assessment content. Next, you might wonder, how can we speed this up? Knowledge Smart has a batch edit tool, which allows us to import a series of questions in a provided format. So we give you a template, which is here accessible within the help menu, that allows you to import any questions that your team might like to author. This handy tool can also be used to make quick edits, which really makes the whole assessment curation process very streamlined, fast, efficient, and adaptable. Next, we'll take a quick look at invites, but keep in mind, based on the integration, all of your assessment assignments can be managed inside Pinnacle Series, offering a centralized place to manage both content and assessment invites. In terms of the invite history, the integration keeps the two platforms on track, offering the flexibility to either track it here within the admin dashboard or in a centralized way through the Pinnacle Series assignment management area. The important thing in terms of the admin dashboard here is that I can customize the invite wording and I can save a unique template. Once those templates are saved, they will be accessible within the Pinnacle Series interface. Next, let's take a quick look at the settings area. These are important settings that need to be configured prior to the assessment invite going out. Here, I am able to specify the level of detail that I would like my users to receive in their assessment result reports. So I can just have a basic report which doesn't expose any question details, or I can actually control the level of feedback all the way down to even hiding the scores on the report. I notice here that I can manage that per profile type. So I might have some employees and lock in a specific feedback setting. And for my external users in Pinnacle Series, I might have a different feedback depth that I would like to configure. From a branding standpoint, I can actually upload my own logo and I can specify where I would like that logo to be displayed. Then we'll have a quick look at the UI options, and here the platform offers a number of personalization options based on your needs. So during the assessment process, you have the option to display a skip question button, as well as a request training button. You can hide the test logout link, you can show a digital proctoring message, and you can control whether you would like there to be an invite link within the email notifications. You might prefer for the access point actually to be via Pinnacle Series assessments, and therefore any email notifications would not actually hold an access link. We can allow self-enrollments for assessments and some of the other items like skill audits and surveys. And we can strictly control which content items we would like to be made available for self-enrollment. The last thing I'll highlight here is the user sync status. Here we notice my user sync is turned on, which is staying in sync with the users that are currently provisioned in Pinnacle Series. This really streamlines user provisioning and makes the Pinnacle Series user data your single source of truth. Any user that is not found in the sync will then be moved to a profile type of ex-employee. And this would help you to identify your active users currently engaged in Pinnacle Series and keep those historical records if needed. All of your Knowledge Smart results are being synchronized over into the assignment management area, either for an individual view of results or then for a more consolidated view of results within the reporting interface, offering a variety of result visualizations. From your home screen within the admin dashboard, you can also take a consolidated export of all your Knowledge Smart data, offering the highest level of detail, including module performance, question performance, and more. And you can also access a dedicated Power BI template, which can be up and running in minutes, allowing you to understand the full breadth of your assessment rollout, alongside the reports being offered inside Pinnacle Series. And that wraps up the demonstration of the Knowledge Smart Admin Dashboard for the purpose of today's webinar. Next, we'll take a look at the difference between skill audits and skill assessments. What people think they know and what they can prove they know are two different numbers. Only one belongs in the boardroom. The important message here is that real professionals don't rely on memory alone at work. They use documentation, standards, and reference material, so the assessment should reflect that reality. Knowledge-based and task-based questions objectively marked. That's the difference between a quick pulse check and data that you'd actually put in front of a client. Skill audits are typically fast to complete and they are more subjective. Yes, we can of course ask managers to provide a rating for a second layer, but ultimately it's only skill assessments that validates the ability to perform a task successfully. Skill audits are generally short-term as skill progression is frequent, whilst skill assessments can really be used to develop employees' long-term value. So at this point, you might wonder, how quickly can I truly get started? You are never starting from a blank page. You are starting from over 700 validated, professionally authored technical skill assessments across multiple software versions. Over 150 of those have ready-to-use learning templates that automatically connect skill gaps to targeted learning inside Pinnacle Series. Full editorial control to personalize the assessments as needed, as well as possibly create assessment content of your own. Personalize the interface and the feedback settings as needed based on your initiative, and deploy and manage everything from a centralized assignment management area within the Pinnacle Series admin portal. Now we know today that most organizations have complex data lakes. The data that you're seeing does not stay trapped in the platform. It really goes wherever your business already makes decisions. Every single data point regarding usage, learning, or assessment results that is already natively available within the admin portal reporting is also accessible via the Pinnacle Series and Knowledge Smart APIs. You can either use the platform reporting or you can use the API to connect the data points to where you are already accessing your dashboards. This data does not exist in a silo, only one team can see. And with that, back to Hala.
So, workforce capability, as we saw, the data itself becomes particularly valuable when we look at it from a leadership perspective. It moves the conversation beyond learning and development and gives leadership skills, intelligence that can support workforce planning, investment decisions, and ultimately project delivery. So, from a strategy perspective, having an objective view of organizational strengths and capability gaps allow the workforce development to align directly with business priorities and future skills and requirements. That visibility also changes how resources are allocated. So instead of applying training broadly or immediately turning to external recruitment when a gap appears, investment can be targeted towards the capabilities where the data shows the greatest needs. That's the competitive advantage as well in a market where firms compete on technical delivery capability, on objective skills benchmarking. This gives the organization something much stronger than assurance. It provides evidence of workforce readiness, and ultimately it comes back to the people. So understanding demonstrated capability beyond a CV or a job title, it supports better decisions around the role alignment, targeted development, around internal mobility, and even retention. So skills assessment isn't simply like a training investment. It becomes a source of a workforce intelligence that helps leadership make more informed decisions about the capability behind the business. Now let's bring this back to a measurable business impact, because this is where the value becomes very tangible. At Davis Partnership, their results were approximately $350,000 in annual savings. And what's interesting about that it came from something that sounds very small, saving just 3 minutes per person per day. So 3 minutes less searching for information, less asking colleagues for help or repeating work, at an average cost of $100 per hour multiplied across a professional workforce. Those small efficiencies quickly translate into measurable operational savings. Furthermore, Zutari demonstrated the value at a different scale. They unified learning and knowledge management across 2,000 employees in 31 offices. So that creates greater consistency across a geographically distributed workforce. And at the same time, the support itself requests dropped by 90% because people could find the knowledge when needed without constantly relying on senior colleagues or an internet for answers. And when we look at the wider industry, the business case itself becomes even clearer. So 52% of construction rework is linked to poor data and miscommunication, while errors and rework can account for 12% of project cost. So applied learning as an idea and in practice addresses that friction by helping teams work more consistently against document standards with the right knowledge available when it's actually needed. So the real return isn't measured by like how much training is delivered. It's measured by what changes in the business. So, in simple words, it's less time, less lost searching for answers, fewer interruptions, and as a result, greater consistency, less rework, and stronger project delivery. That's when workforce development stops being a cost to manage and becomes a measurable driver of performance. That leads us that there are organizations already using Pinnacle series and Knowledge Smart in live AEC environments. And what's worth noting is that their use cases aren't identical, and that's what actually matters. So, for one firm, the priority is global training consistency across multiple countries. For another, it's combining standard product content with firm specific workflows and standards. For another, it's just accelerating Autodesk adoption after technology transition or managing knowledge transfer during a period of change. Closer to home, to Dubai, Khan Sahib has been a valued Accienta client for several years, using as well both platforms to support engineering, learning, and workforce development across their UAE projects. KEO, Aegis, and other have accelerated Revit and Autodesk Forma adoption. As a result, they have the reduced rework and made Pinnacle series a core part of their digital transformation strategy. So if those examples have one operating principle in common, it's that benchmark the skill, they personalize the development and measure what changed, not more training hours or a more intelligent way of training. It's rather that they have training that is evidence-based with the approach where every investment is targeted, every outcome is measured, and the organization itself gets progressively stronger with every cycle. So Eagle Point brings the technology, as we mentioned, Pinnacle Series, Knowledge Smart, and the AI capabilities that power both. Accienta brings the regional context with AEC and manufacturing expertise, Autodesk implementation experience, and a grounding understanding of how GCC organizations actually operate. From their project structures and workforce dynamics to governance requirements and even delivery pressure. So, what brings those two sides together is the ability to shape the solutions around the organization itself. Its Autodesk environments, its internal standards, its technical workflows, and the capability requirements. So, rather than simply introducing another platform, the focus is on aligning with how your teams operate, how your projects are delivered, and where your organization needs to strengthen the capability next. So for enterprise organizations across the GCC, security and governance aren't optional consideration. They're fundamental requirements, and this solution has been designed around the reality of that outset. So we're talking about some of the organization's most valuable knowledge, the firm standards, the delivery workflows, the project methodologies, the client-specific intellectual property. This isn't information that should be exposed or like to unnamed external sources. It needs to remain controlled, trusted, and governed. So everything operates within your organization's approved environment. The project data, the client information, the intellectual property remains protected within your network. So the content is vetted before it becomes accessible, while comprehensive audit trials provide this clear visibility into who is accessing what and when are they accessing it. For enterprise teams, that level of control as well is essential. So it supports compliance, quality assurance, accountability, and even consistent governance across the organization. Because as your organizational knowledge becomes more valuable, protecting and governing what the knowledge becomes is just as important as creating it. So can you let us know more about the implementation resources, Lisa?
Yeah, I think the key question that we often hear is, what does it take to get started? Or where do we begin? And I'd like to just say here that Eagle Point Software certainly brings the technology, but we also bring the onboarding. So we have a rich library of how-to guides and getting started videos. These materials have been developed based on best practices and deep engagements with global audiences. And these resources are readily available within the platform. Accienta, of course, brings the regional delivery, and so you don't need to solve everything on day one. You are guided step by step through your implementation so that your organization can see the value of your investment early on.
And we've covered like the full journey today, from understanding where capability gaps exist to developing, measuring, and continuously improving them. So every organization will approach that journey differently, depending on its teams, its workflows, and priorities. So now we'd like to open the conversation to you. Lisa and I would be very happy to hear your questions, your thoughts, or any challenges that you would like us to explore together. Please feel free to share your questions in the chat or through the Q&A portion, and we'll be happy to discuss them with you. So we'll leave it for like a couple of minutes for any questions.
I'd also like to say we would also value your feedback or comments. So it doesn't really have to be a question. It could also be something about what did you receive from today's session? And one question that I did receive here, which I'd like to touch on very briefly, is with so many out-of-the-box assessments and so many libraries, how do we know what to get started with first? And I think the message here is, in a world of overwhelm, we get to manage that very closely and align that to the business needs that are pertinent today. And that would involve speaking to the project teams. As I mentioned earlier, where is the greatest pain currently? Where are you observing the greatest project risk? Or perhaps where is the greatest cost leakage within the organization? That's where you start, and that's where you drive impact, and then you scale from there.
As for the end of our webinar, we'd like to thank you genuinely for the time and the quality of today's webinar, the GCC is in the middle of the most ambitious construction and infrastructure expansion in its history. As you see, the projects are extraordinary, the technology itself is powerful, the investment is real, but none of that delivers itself. It delivers through people, through team who, like the teams who are equipped, capable, and confident in the work they're being asked to do. So if you walk away with one question, let it be this: are the people behind your next major project genuinely ready? And how would you prove that? Because the organizations that can answer that questions with data are the ones that will lead the industry forward. As we come to the end of today's session, we hope that we've given you a different perspective on workforce capability, not simply as a learning challenge, but as something that directly supports how organizations work, standardize, and delivers. And of course, the conversation does not have to end here. If today raised questions around your own onboarding, Autodesk adoption, knowledge retention, or capability development, our contact details are on the screen, and we would be very happy to continue the discussion with you. Thank you very much for joining us today and for giving us your time. We hope you found the session valuable, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Thank you, everyone.